Okay. Okay. Am I screeching to anyone?
Sound good to me.
Okay, good. I think I know what mistake I made last time. So if you give me one more second, I'll call the meeting to order. We are now live on YouTube. I just want to bring up my papers here. And I'd like to call the Franklin Township HARB and Historical Meeting to order at 7:10 on October the 5th. There we go. And in attendance, in addition to myself, are Mr. Phillips, Mr. Latimer, Mr. Riddle, Ms. Gallagher, and Mr. Mandich, who is our second Oligassi this evening. And I'm going to see right now if I can fix that and rename him. And
I've been renamed numerous times over the years.
yeah. And there we go.
Oh, it was Chester County days.
It was very busy at the garage. We had over 180 people.
Nice. Sounds like a success.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. I have nobody else trying to log on that I'm aware of. So we have no public and we have no public comment. So I'd like to move to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the prior meeting. That would be September 7th, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to note that even though I reread these once before, I did it on the screen, I did it again on paper, and I'd like to make a few small changes. I would like to, on the first page, the second paragraph under new business, on the line that ends in the word he, just before that, there's a comma followed by a period. I'd like to delete the comma there. And then the line before that, the last six words say that the both types of work, and I would like to remove the, so it just says that both types of work. On the second page, under Churchill African Church Cemetery, I would like to hyphenate African American because it's used as a adjective here. And then on the third page, in the list of Civil War veterans, William Brown, African American, so should also be hyphenated there. Then on the second paragraph after that list, in the middle of that paragraph, the line begins, Mr. Legassi thus said. I would like to change that to also, since it's a characterization. The is a typo for then. Under item D on this page, the header plan proposal ends with an L that's not in italics or underlined, and I'd like that to be changed to italics or underline. And then finally, I noticed that on the last page in the first paragraph, and although I believe that this is fundamentally a correct characterization of what was said, it does sound a little strange in the record where it says, suggested that the Dobbins house in Gettysburg has a nice basement bar worth a visit. Nan, I wonder if you might have any suggestions for recharacterizing that?
You could say that the Dobbins House is the oldest structure in Gettysburg and should be visited. I don't know. I don't have the right words.
But you were commenting on the charm of the,
Well, it really is, but I mean, I guess in the minutes, it sounds like it's a little bit odd that we say
sounds
that,
like
but,
you're suggesting we all get together.
but it
there
is
for-
a basement bar. It's as big as, it's very small and only has like 4 tables in it and this small little bar.
Well, how about,
Basement dining room.
if I say it has a small, charming basement bar that is worth seeing?
Yes, there you go. That's better.
As opposed to perhaps that is worth
Got
having
it.
too many beers in.
Yes,
Which
got it. Got it.
seems to suggest that. And
It
I
is.
just,
It's definitely worth seeing and
Yeah.
sitting down too, but don't add that.
okay, so we'll make that emendation to that line. Does anybody else have any suggested changes or corrections before I ask for a motion to approve?
No.
No. Okay, then I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second that.
Okay, so Nan moves and Lou seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I think we're unanimous. All opposed, say nay. I think we're unanimous there. Okay, so in order to, again, allow Bob to leave when, this business that he only needs to attend for is taken care of, I'd like to move on to the, okay, where did I place it? Sorry. The suggested changes. And if I can get myself, allow myself to change the screen, share the screen. Okay, one participant at a time can share. So I'm going to make sure there's nothing truly bizarre on my screen. And there isn't. Now I've got to find this, see if I can open this. Bear with me 1 second, and I'll just bring these up on the screen. I think it might be helpful to see them directly rather than simply talk about them. Okay, so all right, so let me share my screen here. Okay, really? Let's try that. Okay. Okay, that should do it, I think. All right. Okay, so can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing it on the main screen, but there we go. So the first suggested change is under building permit with the addition of or structure, which is straightforward. The Next one is under certificate of appropriateness. And this is a slight modification of the process because instead of authorizing the issuance of a building permit for said request, because not all work requires a building permit, but in the historic district, but that work may require nonetheless a certificate of appropriateness. After review, then this would authorize, the certificate of appropriateness would authorize the work to proceed and if necessary, the issuance of a building permit for said request. The next one is simply another building or structure where or structure is added. The next one renames the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, the Secretary of Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties. This is the correct current title of the standards. And then instead of referring a person to Exhibit A, they note that they are available online at the National Park Service. Whatever, this would allow us to not have to worry about constantly updating Exhibit A as the standards get tweaked. The
Should
next
online,
one-
should
I'm sorry,
online,
go ahead.
should online be one word? Or is that,
I'm here, can you see?
Yeah. Question is, should online be one word?
the
The-
last
oh.
sentence?
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question, and
I don't
I
know.
would say no at this point in time. I suspect we'll be there eventually, but I would say no, it should be 2 words currently.
Okay,
I'm drawing on my editorial background saying that. I'm taking it more conservative rather than, I'm sure you can find a lot, there are plenty of uses of it as 1 word, and there are plenty of uses of it as 2 words or a hyphenated adjective.
yeah,
But right now I would say no.
okay.
How about if you change it to virtually?
Well, how about if I change it available at the National Park Service website?
Perfect.
Okay, so I will actively edit this if all goes well. I wish it wouldn't do that. Oh, yeah, I need this. All right, that will avoid that. The second one, structure, anything constructed having a permanent or semi-permanent location on another structure or in or on the ground. And the reason for adding or on is because some of the things described here, such as gazebos and sheds, are actually set on the ground and are not in the ground. And those are all the changes to definitions. So before I proceed beyond definitions, I'd like to know if anyone noticed anything else that they felt ought to be changed when they reviewed this.
I did not.
I didn't.
No,
This is, and this,
Bob? I'm sorry, Bob, did you say anything? I'm having, did anybody hear Bob?
a little bit.
There he
Yeah, I'm
is.
not hearing him well on my end.
Say, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. So, did you, at least in terms of definitions, did you have any other suggestions or issues? Bob? I'm not hearing you, Bob.
The only thing I see under structure where you have bracketed solar arrays encompassed, probably that period should be after the bracket than before it.
That was not my, um, no, so the question here, actually, I'm sorry, that's my note. And thank you for catching that. The question is whether solar arrays are in fact encompassed by the phrasing that says anything constructed, including, comma, without limitation, comma, building sheds, etc. Or do we have to mention solar arrays? And I guess in some ways, this is really a question for the solicitor, because this is a question of whether the language that's used in this section is encompassing enough. If somebody wanted to put solar arrays on the ground, for example, could we say, yeah, you can have solar arrays, but you need to, you know, maybe hide it so its visual impact is not you know, very large or minimized, I guess, mitigated.
You want to put solar arrays, comma, after, so decks, solar arrays, and swimming pools, just put
No,
it in.
actually, I'd like to get away from trying to specify every last potential problem.
I see. That makes sense.
It came up, and this came up very specifically because when solar arrays were being discussed sometime back, the question had come up as to whether there needed to be special mention of the historic district. And I said it was my feeling that the historic district ordinance had enough teeth to cover that sort of thing. And I would prefer not to be tied into a situation where if we don't mention something, it gets a free pass. So this is really a large question about how to make the word structure broad enough without having to simply list absolutely everything that a structure that might be a structure subject to this ordinance.
That's fine. I understand that.
Yeah. Bob and Chuck, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you that you're heading down a road that we also don't call out bird baths.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you know, that's what, there's an example where we would never consider it. However, you know, it could be considered, or bird homes or something like that. And next thing you know,
Bird accessory structures?
yeah, I mean, yeah, something gets built large enough that's should be reviewed. It doesn't get reviewed, and they say, well, it's for my birds. Like,
Right.
yeah.
If somebody built a giant pigeon house, for example.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's this is like a list of things that you can't use when you describe what you want to do. And that doesn't really serve
Right.
anything.
So, Bob, do you have any further comments? And thank you for catching that.
No, I believe that first part of that sentence where it says anything constructed having a permanent or semi-permanent location on another structure or in or on the ground covers solar arrays.
Right. And so my only question for the solicitor is to be sure that without limitation, including without limitation, means that the list that we have there is in fact not a limiting list. That's what without limitation is meant to do. So, so this is something when this gets presented to the board, it should be, I need to make sure that I bring this section to their attention and ask the question and see that the question is answered by Mark Thompson.
Yeah, my thinking would be get rid of "and" before swimming pools and put "etc." after swimming pools, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
I would do that. Too.
Yeah, well, I don't know how. That's the way regular people read, so I don't know how legal it is, but.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will do that and indicate that as in yellow as a change. And then that will sort of force the question. And I can note that we've made this change. For that reason.
Well, curious question. Why does it start out with something on a structure and then go to the ground? Why not on the ground and then another structure? That just seems to make more sense to me.
If I had to guess, it's because so much of what's in the list that follows is on or in the ground. And so there's a certain logical sequence to arranging it that way by putting on another structure first.
Okay. That's the way it was originally written.
That's the way it was written, and I didn't write it. But
Yeah.
if I'm looking at it, I'm just thinking that it's easier to say it that way and follow it with this list, which are mainly things that are separate structures and objects, not typically, not always, not often attached, you know.
Vending machines? Really? We're going to limit vending machines? Goodness.
It was in there.
Is there still such a thing?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the issue comes with vending machines out on the road. As of now that we've got, you know, other existing issues, I think that really that's what they were aiming at. And I suspect that this was at the time fairly standard language.
I wouldn't take it out. I mean, honestly, in Germany, they use vending machines in front of facilities all the time for Sundays because they're not open on Sundays.
Right.
So I could, it's a potential problem for sure. Somebody could put a vending machine out there to get your yoo-hoo as you ride by on your bike.
We may be overregulating a little bit, but for the moment, I'm trying to keep this changes to a minimum.
It looks bomb-proof to me, ish.
Yeah, everything is always ish. So if there are no other questions, I'll move on to the second part of this. I think this is fairly straightforward. So this is the big one. And I think we can get the whole thing on the screen here. So the original said, upon receipt of a completed application for building permit, which does not describe our typical process from the start. And so what I attempted to do is describe our typical process historically. That is, when any alteration to a building, structure, or site in the district is undertaken that requires a certificate of appropriateness, whether a building permit is required or not, the building inspector shall act in accordance with the procedures being followed in that office, except those procedures that are modified by the following requirements. The building inspector shall not issue a building permit for any construction, alteration, reconstruction, repair, restoration, or demolition of all or any part of any building or structure in the historic district, excluding minor repairs and maintenance, painting, interior projects, or projects that cannot be seen from the public way, or otherwise indicate that such work can proceed. And that phrase I added to deal with situations where the work would not require a building permit, but would require a certificate of appropriateness, until the Board of Supervisors has issued a certificate of appropriateness. If the building inspector or his or her representatives issues a building permit without a certificate of appropriateness due to an administrative or clerical error, said building permit shall be voided. So much of the language, except for the very first sentence and except for the part where it says otherwise indicate that such works can proceed, is language that was in there already. This is simply an attempt to deal with work that does not require a building permit, but does require a certificate of appropriateness, and indicate that the process is about a certificate of appropriateness, not a building permit, and about getting that delivered. Does this seem clear and workable?
Looks good to me.
My question is this the only place, the excluding minor repairs, maintenance, et cetera, is that the only place where we cite what is excluded?
No, we also cite it under the definition of alteration. Bear with me and I'll sit back up. And it says, these provisions shall not be construed to prevent the ordinary maintenance or repair of any building, structure, or site object where such work does not require a permit and where the purpose and effect of such work is to correct any deterioration or decay of damage to a building, structure, site of object, and to sort of the same to the occurrence condition prior to the occurrence. Alterations do not include paint, color, selection, interior changes, or changes to appearance that cannot be seen from the public way. So this is essentially recapitulating that in slightly different words.
I would recommend taking that out of the lower section, because often things get changed in one place and don't get changed in the other. I would take it out. I don't think it's necessary here.
Okay, I get your point. Let me just,
It also simplifies the sentence if you take it out.
okay, now this is going to be a straight delete. Wait a second, I just, all right, then.
Yeah, that's simpler.
Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one is unfortunately probably just as complicated in some ways as that one, but I didn't do side-by-side paragraphs. So there, everything in yellow highlights what's either deleted or rewritten. So originally this said, the building inspector shall determine whether the work proposed constitutes a minor repair or maintenance, see definition of alteration, in which case the building inspector will acknowledge that the work can proceed and grant a permit if required, or if the work constitutes an alteration requiring HARB review and a certificate of appropriateness from the Board of Supervisors. So the building inspector is basically going to indicate to the person doing the work that either the work can proceed and he can grant a permit if it were, for example, interior work, or the work can proceed and there is no permit, such as painting the house, or if somebody was inquiring about that. Or the building inspector will indicate if the work constitutes an alteration requiring, will acknowledge and grant a permit if required, or if the work constitutes an alteration requiring. No, that's bad language. Okay. This, I would have benefited from rewriting this. So, the reason I think it's confusing here is because I've got two ifs. And what I would just like is to reduplicate the language a little bit and restate or shall determine. Because that's what's, to my way of thinking, missing and makes this confusing. No. Okay. That's not good, and I apologize. I'm taking that out. And instead, what needs to be reduplicated here is whether. I hate legalese. So, and then I removed if, so I have to delete that. Bear with me one sec. So the building inspector is going to determine whether the work constitutes a minor repair or whether the work constitutes an alteration requiring HARB review. And then instead of referring to the application, I shifted the focus to the work because originally it was referencing a building permit application, and we need to be talking about the work because the building permit application is not always in question. And so should the work require a certificate of appropriateness, the building inspector shall have the applicant submit an application for a certificate of appropriateness and forward it and copies of any building permit application, plot plan, building plans, specifications filed by the applicant, as well as any other materials required by the certificate of appropriateness application to the HARB. And so I've expanded what's required a little bit because this the COA application has from the get-go asked for photographs. And I don't want to start enumerating like every last thing that needs to be included. I'd like to shift that to the COA application. This is the same problem earlier with, does our solar arrays included?
Mhm.
But otherwise, the shift here is simply from a focus on a pure building permit and getting the building permit through the COA process to getting the work through the COA process. So
Fine with me.
Chuck, do you have any comments? Because you did before.
I said it looks good to me.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you. Bob, do you have any comments?
What you changed there works for me, sir.
Okay, I just want to be sure that this all makes sense to everyone before so B, this is the situation where subsection 7 is a reference to basically denying approval. And it makes no sense to require sufficient additional copies to deny approval, but not have them to be required for approval. And so instead of saying to make the determination set for in subsection 7, it says needed for the HARB to make its recommendation and the Board of Supervisors to make its decision will be available. So I think this is fairly straightforward.
Why are you taking out the number? Oh,
See this subsection 7 here?
okay. No, I thought it was saying 7 copies. Never
No.
mind. No.
And it's referring to this section here, recommendation of disapproval. And it makes no sense to, it's as if we're demanding more information so that we could disapprove your project, which I find a kind of disturbing request. And then the next item simply says upon receipt of a certificate of appropriateness application. And I need to lowercase this because the ordinance as a general rule does not capitalize certificate of appropriateness. So now we're working, the HARB is working from the certificate of appropriateness application instead of a building permit application. I did not say completed here because our certificate of appropriateness application is an application that follows the process through. And so there's only going to be, it won't be complete when it's given to the HARB. So if you're wondering why I didn't use the word completed, that's why I didn't use completed.
How about if you put substantially complete? You don't want to be in that situation where they submit something that's so under.
Right. Well, what if no, then we need to be specific. So
Or just leave it as it is. No, we can leave it as it is. It says a certificate of appropriateness application. If the application is not filled out, it doesn't need to be accepted.
no, it doesn't need to be accepted. The other thing is too, we can, we're within our rights to demand full information. if
Yeah.
we need, if we've done that. So I don't think that that's a,
Can we go back to B? Because I am really confused what B is actually asking for.
So
It
what-
appears like it starts off talking about the number of copies. So we're stipulating the amount of paper, but then it ends with, I'm lost. Why am I struggling
Okay.
to read it?
so let me read this out loud and see if it is confusing to everyone. The building inspector shall require the applicant to submit a sufficient number of additional copies of material required to be attached to a completed application so that the information needed for the HARB to make its recommendation and the Board of Supervisors to make its decision will be available.
I have no idea what that said. Does anybody else?
What it says is that the applicant has to give you enough copies so that the supervisors and the HARB have enough copies to render a recommendation and decision. Fundamentally, this only becomes an issue when we have a project, and we never have had one, which requires very expensive uh, drawings, like maybe sealed commercial drawings or something, that the township might not be in a position to reproduce. Normally, we reproduce all this stuff. We could, in some ways, remove this, but I think this is probably a sort of standard requirement for various sorts of things.
Yeah, but now everybody just submits something digitally.
Right, and we print it out, and they don't have to, I mean, to my mind, this is simply something that we might need to make use of if we had, something expensive that we needed to have several copies of, so that everybody could see what was going on. In most cases, this is really moot. The township simply reproduces enough copies or emails it along, and people print it out or look at it electronically. So I agree with you. I just think that this is a fallback in a rare case. It was in there. I'm just tweaking it. I'm not removing it.
Yeah, but while we're looking at it, why not take it out?
For the moment, because I don't know when or why it might be needed, I would just as soon leave it and not have to.
It'll never be looked at again. It'll stay there and it'll just be a confusing part of the code. That's whenever we always kind of kick these down the road. Not we as in the HARB, but the town, it becomes kind of, oh, I don't want to touch that. To me, it says absolutely nothing in today's world. It's kind of.
All right. Well, how about if we do this?
I mean, if we wanted to simply say that the applicant's responsible for providing enough copies
Yeah.
of materials, then there's a lot easier way of saying it than this.
Yeah, generally I'm not trying to rewrite this though.
Yeah, so I would just strike it. That's my feeling. I don't know how everybody else feels.
How about if we pass it along with another alternative for handling this is to delete the section entirely?
Sure.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
It's just-
I appreciate it.
Mark Thompson says, I don't see why you really need this. If this township staff says, I don't see why you need this, then I'm fine with it, deleting it.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. Move on.
I get your point. I just don't know. I have no way of knowing when this ordinance was written, why that may have been included. And so,
It's Old English.
It's
no,
pre-computer.
English. This is, it's a historical artifact, but I don't know why.
Within our historical documentation, that is fantastic. It's a circle. I get it now.
I know what you're saying, and I've been in on discussions with things like this in other instances from the planning commission. So I know where you're coming from, but
Mhm.
I'm playing a conservative role here.
Yeah, I would say if you didn't touch the paragraph at all, I wouldn't have said anything, but
Yeah, the problem is that the paragraph makes no sense as written.
mhm.
So this one, again, just, this is the on receipt. I think we discussed this. It just pushed down because I added that. And then the only, you can't really see this, but that S is struck through. So it's
Mhm.
going to become the HARB's recommendation rather than the recommendations. It's a little bit of a moot point, but the HARB basically submits one recommendation, which may have many subsections. This is building or structure again. This is changing the building and the structure to the building or structure. I'm not sure why it was worded that way, but that
Yeah,
makes,
this makes more sense.
yeah, not only that, but it parallels the second half of the sentence, which says,
Mhm.
so, you know, oh, actually, while we're at it, this should be buildings probably.
Yes, good.
That's just a typo. This is building or structure. And then everything else is. So anyway, these are the suggested changes. The supervisors are going to have to agree to adopt them and go through that process. I don't know whether, I don't think they would necessarily go to the planning commission, but they would have to figure out how they want to handle them. I want to get them in front of them so that we can reduce ambiguities and have a ordinance that reflects the process that we have historically used. Excuse me. So since I prepared this, I would like to make a motion that the members of the HARB and Historical Commission recommend that these proposed changes be forwarded to the supervisors for their review and incorporation into the ordinance. Yeah, let me change it. I would like to recommend, I make a motion that the HARB Historical Commission forward these changes to the supervisors for their review and possible incorporation into the historic district ordinance. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Oh,
All right, I heard Nan first. I don't know who really got there first, but I heard Nan. So I would, we need a vote. All in favor say aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All right, so I hear a unanimous vote. And if I misheard, speak up now. Okay, so Bob, that concludes the HARB only portion of this. So you are excused and free to go.
Okay, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, I imagine that in the future, there will probably be fewer meetings where you need to attend.
Okay.
But in any case, we will always alert you when we're requesting your presence.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, you have a nice evening.
You too.
Okay, let me unshare my screen here. So that, no. How do I get out of the share? Stop share. Okay, so moving on with the other business, I again have nothing to report concerning updating historic resource surveys and the PHMC data from the map.
Paul, is it okay if I'm excused too, or do you need me for a quorum?
Can you just, I don't need you for quorum, but can you just stay for like 2 minutes more? And
Oh,
then-
I'll stay for 10 minutes more. if need
No,
it.
because I'd like to begin the discussion with the Churchill African Cemetery. You had talked to Lynn and passed along her contact information, and
Yes.
she is interested in giving us a tour. Shall I, you think, just go ahead and contact her and see if we can arrange tour dates and then circulate that with the members? Or do you think it would be more appropriate if that were coming from you?
Oh, I think it's fine coming from you,
Okay.
more official.
I don't know about that. You're a member of the HARB and the Historical Commission yourself. Okay, so that's the only thing I wanted to get input on from you. I will get in touch with her. I was at the London Britain Historical Commission meeting this morning, and because heritage centers are going to be a part possibly of the proposal that could arise out of the Mason-Dixon project should it go forward. They're also interested in a tour, and I would imagine she'd be happy to include anybody who can make it.
Oh, sure.
But I will
I think
talk. Okay. Well, you take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, Lou.
Right.
Lou,
Yes.
you just fold up and you'll go away that way, I believe, if you fold it.
That's a nice way to go away. It's like
Yeah.
the old silent movie with the, thank you.
And if not, I'll run in there and close it up. And
Okay.
I think eventually your connection will break.
Okay.
I also have a couple other things I can report on this. I was talking to Dave Hawk, who was with New Garden Township and has a fair amount of experience doing deed research. And he's going to do some deed research on the cemetery parcel to see what he can come up with. And I passed along to him the information I had. It occurred to me when when I was looking at the draft of the Mason-Dixon grant proposal, because they were asking for historical input, that when we start talking about the Mason-Dixon line and its role in our country's history, both in terms of defining the boundaries of the states and then later becoming a symbolic boundary between the free states and the slave states and leading up to the Civil War, that the veterans who are buried in, at least some of the veterans who are buried in Churchill Cemetery, I think perhaps all of them, Nan, I'm not sure if they're all Civil War veterans, but
Yeah, they're all Civil War,
so
I think.
yeah, but that makes a cemetery qualify as a site that has a story to tell in that, if there's a way of incorporating it when the time comes.
I think that I took that genealogy course, and it's important that not only we take what's on Find a Grave, that we do research and get the actual documents of those folks, the 10 gentlemen that we mentioned last time.
And I realize that not all of those graves are marked, but we do at least have 2 graves that are very clearly marked. So even under those circumstances, it would still be a potential historic site of interest in terms of the Mason-Dixon connectivity project, should there be an appropriate way to include it.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, so going ahead. And then finally, I was down at St. Francis Hospital. We were taking a friend down there for procedure. And coming back, we passed the mother church for what is now usually called the African Union Methodist Protestant Church. It is one of 2 churches that descend from Peter Spencer, who lived in Wilmington and founded the African Union Church. So this is actually the first time I've gained any real insight into the meaning of an African Union Church. And so it's not necessarily an African, it is an African Methodist church, but it's not the standard African Methodist denomination that's associated with the Mother Bethel Church in Philadelphia. It's likely associated with one of the 2 mother churches in Wilmington, because the denomination split. And so I started looking at the churches, and Nan, you were talking about contacting Galilee. And Galilee is a union church that it's the American, I don't know if it's United or Union, I'd have to look at my document, Methodist Episcopal Church, that is a descendant of that. And so they may in fact have a very direct connection denominationally to this cemetery, as might a church in West Grove, which is also a UAME church, whose name, I have a list and I'll send it to you.
Okay, so you're saying that they're connected to the church in Wilmington?
They're connected to actually not the church we went by, which is a slightly different one, but they're connected to a denomination that was founded historically in Wilmington by Peter Spencer.
Okay.
And at least this cemetery, when the church that it was associated with, at least when that church was founded, it would have been connected with this Peter Spencer denomination, the denomination, whose name changed over time. So but it starts out as being something else. Then it became an African Union Church. Then it became, it united with another church, and it became African Union First Colored Methodist Protestant Church. But they usually go, and that's still the formal title, but they usually go by African Union Methodist Protestant, AUMP.
So I guess to talk to Galilee and see how they connect into all those different denominations that you just mentioned, how they fit in.
Yeah, well, I mean, if what I'm seeing on the one of the 2 websites, they're definitely associated with the one of the denominations, which means that they would have a historical connection.
Good.
With the church.
Well, they're definitely connected with the graveyard, because I think one of the founders of their churches is buried there.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
Right.
Because it's the same it would be the same denomination, or at least the the denomination that Galilee is now a member of is arose in a split in, I think, the 1860s. I'll send you all the information.
Okay, thanks.
So that was sort of serendipitous, but it's sort of good to know, because we do know we have churches belonging to the denomination that are actually very close by. That these churches do have even if they don't have much of a current awareness of the cemetery, their denomination has a historical connection to the church that used to be at Church Hill.
So are they related to the church in Newark?
The one that is sort of at the top of 896 as you come into Newark from the
Yeah, right on the corner there.
um,
St. John's African Methodist Church, AM. So is that,
so if it's AUMP or AUME, they would be. They may not be if they're,
there's no U?
yeah, so they may not be, they may be related to the connected.
Oh, wait a second. Wait, this congressional, congression was formally incorporated as St. John's AUMP Church.
Okay, so they're connected to the mother church that I passed in downtown Wilmington, and since this church out here was founded before the denominational split, they both have historical connections to the church itself.
Yeah. So it was founded in 1848. Yeah, so it would have
It
been,
would have been founded about the same time as the church out here,
yeah.
because it was
And-
founded, I think, 1846.
Yeah, very, very close to each other. Okay. I don't know what that means, but
Well, from my point of view, it means I'm understanding that there is a very real denominational connection between the cemetery, Church Hill, and churches that continue to function locally, which it's good to know, because it had been suggested to me that I ought to be talking to Mother Bethel, and Mother Bethel, I don't think that they actually didn't have the records, so they couldn't have told me if they had any relationship, but historically, but in fact, that was the wrong church to go talking to. It's taken me a couple of years to realize that, but I know it now.
yeah, this one, their historic plaque on the, I guess it's on the side of their wall, references the African Union Church in Wilmington.
Mm-hmm. That would be Peter Spencer's church.
Okay.
So Sally, do you want to say anything about your research, or are you pretty much in the same place?
I'm pretty much in the same place. I didn't get much done. I did find, I was going to get in contact with that Miss Crampton.
Right.
Well, I never did. I did find an email address for her, and that's as far as I got.
Okay.
So
It sounds like you've been busy a little bit.
yeah, I got my hands full with this puppy, so she's keeping me busy. But there was something else I was going to say. I don't know. I can't remember now. I don't know.
Along the same lines, I'm looking at the map. I'm back with the same church. There was no cemetery associated with this church. So I wonder if, I wonder what the relationship was with this church. The people were buried somewhere else. some of the people that went to this church may have been buried in our cemetery.
Chuck, looking back at the big document that I got from Find a Grave and stuff, most of the people are from Avondale, Westchester. There's not any, I don't think, from Newark. Not that they didn't do that, but
Yeah.
from the stuff that I found, they're mostly from Chester County. And Avondale is a big place. New Garden, that kind of stuff,
Yeah, I didn't see anybody from Delaware.
right? And I wonder if this particular church, we're looking upon it as if it was an established church. I'm thinking it was kind of like a summer revival, like a tent revival place where they went and worshiped at certain times during the year. And it also had the graveyard.
It may
Because
be.
none of the churches in Avondale have graveyards as well, correct?
That I don't know.
So, I mean, I don't know.
The other church, the one in West Grove is right on, I want to say Guernsey?
Really? Where?
Yeah, it is Guernsey and I don't know if that's Summit. That's not Summit. Right over the railroad tracks, I think.
Yeah,
Past the railroad tracks.
trying to
Like
get
right
there.
next Route 1, old Route 1?
No.
Down, a block or two down.
South of Pennsylvania.
Funny. I must have been by it a million times and I don't remember.
You know where the new townhouses are going in?
Yeah.
It's right across the street from those new townhouses.
Okay. I don't normally go down. I'll have to go take a look.
Yeah,
mean,
there's
Right,
There
that's
you
what correct? That is where we're talking about, right, Sally?
yes.
Okay.
Is it also called Galilee?
No, let me just quickly check my document here. I can tell you. Hold on. I just have to drill down through several layers of
Didn't even know that.
churches. Okay. So
Enon Missionary Baptist Church is what it's called now, I believe.
is it? So this list, and this was currently as of the website that I was looking at, it's the current one so far as I know. It was Star of Bethlehem UAME Church on West Summit Avenue.
Oh, okay. That's
Okay.
not the church I thought it was. I see this Star of Bethlehem. It's in the middle of Summit Avenue.
And then there's one in New Garden as well. No, sorry, New Garden Memorial Church is in Kennett on Linden Street.
We gave you entirely the wrong location, Nan.
Oh, that's
I
fine.
know where you're talking about, Chuck. There is a little church there,
Yeah.
and that's in an African American church.
Enon Missionary Baptist Church. But I do see this Star of Bethlehem.
Star of Bethlehem, that's the same denomination as Galilee.
There's a book, a paperback book. I just had it out recently that somebody published about, I don't know, 25 years ago, and he has a nice description of, if I remember correctly, of those churches in it. The churches in West Grove. I don't have it close by, but I'll look at it and see what it says. It might give some information on the origin of the churches.
I got online some material about the Galilee. That's how I know that one of the founders is buried there. I think it was a history of Avondale. One of those books. I don't have my collection in front of me. But I agree, we should look at all that.
Yeah, so I'll send everybody the descriptive material that I have on the African Union churches. It's not a lot, but it at least gives you some description of the relationship of the two churches and their background.
And one more thing back to Newark. I guess it really doesn't have any bearing on our church here, but there are a couple cemeteries going out of Newark on Elkton Road, which always kind of made me curious because there's no churches there. There's one on the right and there's one on the left if you're going out of Newark on Elkton Road towards Maryland. Just if you're down that way, you know.
The one's rather large, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
On you're talking about on 273?
Yeah.
Well, there's one on the left. It's a Presbyterian church right before you get to Nutters if you're headed from Newark towards Maryland. And that's a Presbyterian church. It's way down the hill. It's an old one. That and the Rock Church or one of the original.
No. You're
Too far
we're not
down.
we're not on the same road. I know where you're talking about.
Yeah, she was talking about Elkton Road,
Not
Right.
273. Okay.
not
213.
279.
213.
That's when you get into Maryland, what it becomes.
Like if you go past the Deer Park and you're headed out towards like, there's an Acme out there, there's a Home
Right.
Depot.
West Main Street becomes Elkton Road.
Oh, I see where you are.
There's two old cemeteries, one on either side of the road. I don't know, but I don't know anything about them.
Oh, I see one of them. Okay. One's right at Park Place. I don't know what Park Place is. That's curious. Yeah, there's no church there that I see.
And the one on the right, as you're going out of Newark, it's just, if I remember, it's just kind of not fancy headstones, just, you know, very plain kind of, I don't know. So
Wow,
maybe
yeah,
older.
they're directly across the street from each other too.
Okay.
Well, not directly, but almost, you know, you can see one from the other.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's hard to believe that Newark might have had segregated municipal cemeteries.
Could be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, you know, speaking.
That makes sense.
But it was a segregated state.
Yeah.
In Delaware was.
Kind of sad because the one's right next to like a U-Haul place, and
Right.
I don't know what the other one is. The gas station's nearby.
Yeah, I know where you're talking about.
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing that you can tell is really, the ones in the middle, like of student housing. They kind of both are.
Do
Yeah,
they have, you looking at like Google Maps or something?
Of course.
Yeah. If you zoom in and you're not looking at the satellite, do that have labels?
Yeah, but there's no labels on these cemeteries. Is that what you're asking?
Okay. Sometimes things do get labeled. That's all.
Yeah, usually, and that's why I'm looking for churches. And I don't see all the churches we've discussed previously were labeled.
Mhm.
So even some very small churches, like the one in West Grove that we were talking about, it looks like a house. It's that small, but it's all labeled up. Yeah, there's nothing.
It's probably a meeting house style church, you know, very simple. would look as much like a schoolhouse as it would, anything else.
The one in West Grove.
Yeah,
It looks like a house.
yeah, okay.
I mean, it's not even nice rectangular or anything. It doesn't look like you could actually have more than 10 people in there. Very, yeah, and it's mid-block too. It's not even on a corner. So, very interesting.
Maybe they converted the house to a house of worship, That can happen too.
Which kind of falls suit with what may or may not have been at the cemetery.
Yeah. Nan, do you have anything else to add on this since you're a big driving force behind this, or?
Not so much this week. I haven't done anything.
That's fine. I just wanted to, before moving on, just sort of poll everybody and see.
Yeah, I
Sure.
guess I need to contact Galilee. That's on my number one list and talk to them as usual.
Yeah, well, I've got a few of those things to do too, but I have a little more time, seem to have a little more time now. So we'll see how it goes.
So does UAME, does the A stand for African?
Yes.
So the modern church across the street from St. John's in Newark is actually also a UAME church, Mount Zion. It was probably built in the 80s.
Yeah, but,
Oh,
okay.
they must have some sort of relationship. They're directly across the street from each other, but
Yeah, they may.
yeah, different name. Oh, and there's a cemetery. Huh.
A lot of the relatives of folks that are buried at Churchill are buried in that big cemetery right by Route 1, Union Hill, where you get off at Kennett Square. You get off and you're going to go into Kennett off Route 1 on 82.
Yeah,
It's on both sides of the street. Yeah, there's a lot of them, a lot of their relatives in there as well. And that's not affiliated, I don't think, with any church. I think it's just a cemetery, if I'm not correct. Like the Ricks family, they've got a lot of folks buried in Churchill, and then they've got even more in Union Hill.
And you don't think Union Hill doesn't have any affiliation?
I'm not sure of that, Chuck, but I don't
There's
think so.
well, there's that Episcopal Church of the Advent.
I don't think it does, because I know a whole bunch of different people that have been buried there, and I don't think they were all affiliated with the same church. The one side is Catholic.
Yeah, one's St. Patrick's Cemetery and one's Union Hill. I'm just reading Google. So.
Yeah, well, it's Union Hill that the relatives are buried in.
Okay. Which is on the west side. St. Patrick's is on the east.
Interesting, I didn't know that. I thought it was all Union Hill.
Looks like Union Hill has plenty of space too. In case anyone's looking for a plot.
Well,
I'm getting punchy.
yeah, I have nothing to report on the related continuing topic of other township cemeteries at this time. Concerning the Mason-Dixon Art Corner connectivity plan, I can tell you that the supervisors approved joining into the grant proposal and contributing what would be a quarter share of the matching grant money required, which would be about $5,000. Should the grant be awarded by the county, London Britain is the lead on this grant, and the grant was submitted. And it's my understanding that the townships will know sometime in November whether they've been awarded the grant, and Then the grant will be managed by the Brandywine Conservancy for the townships, and it will probably not really get underway until 2022. But at some point, there is going to be historical involvement and input for aspects of the connectivity plan. So that's out there, and it's moving along, but any further motion forward is going to require that the grant be approved by the Chester County, I forget who awards the grant and how it's like a vision partnership grant or something. I don't know. That may come from the Planning Commission, Chester County Planning Commission. And there's nothing to report on the 896 road work and the walkable Kemsville compared to, nothing to add to what was said last time. I have had an email exchange with Sarah Cody at 1723 about the possibility of including historical brochures there relating to Franklin Township history. Perhaps one on the township generally, one on Ben Franklin's relationship to the township. And I was thinking that I could perhaps develop one on the Mason-Dixon line and the associated monuments that are nearby. Anyway, they're interested in acting as a host spot for a set of brochures, and so I figure I will adapt the two we already have, which is simply a folded piece of paper, and then work up something on the Mason-Dixon line. And I might ask you to all look at it and just see if you have any feedback on it when the time comes.
I think it's good that we start with the brochures. I last week was in San Francisco visiting my daughter, and she took me north of the city to a place called Point Reyes Station, which is part of the National Seashore. They had a small town. They had some very interesting short signs with some pictures. I think we've all seen them in other places about history in the area, just really quick, where you can just walk along and kind of look at it. And I thought of Kemmelsville. That's why she took me there. She said, do you think Kemmelsville could be something like this? But along those same lines about, at the vineyard or at the park, that we should think about doing permanent signs that talk about the history of our township. Really briefly. I mean, just really briefly. Like was Ben Franklin here? That sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That you can just kind of walk through. So it's nothing to be done now, but I'm glad we're starting with the brochures, but something that we should think about because people just don't know. I mean, people just don't know anything about our history. So.
Right. And they do get a fair amount of foot traffic. So.
Right. Right.
Why is a good place to start. And so I have to, I'll get these worked back up again and then see how the Codys react to them and then move on to Paradox and what's the other one?
Patron?
Yeah, Patron. Yeah. Is Kreutz in our township or not?
I believe it is. I've heard it is.
I know it's right up there. I can't remember whether it's, but then that would be another one. And then at least as far as when the Mason-Dixon project gets going, and if I've got a Mason-Dixon brochure, I'd see if the cidery over in Sturgisville, in Louisville would be interested in something.
It's in the back end of our township. That's why.
Yeah, I know. It's right on the.
Nope, it is not.
Okay.
It's just outside.
Yeah.
But if you were looking to do something yep, just, you know what? Some of the land, no. Yeah, maybe some of the land is. It's that close. Wow. It is super close. It is really close, but it's not.
Yeah, and ultimately, if we get involved with this connectivity project, what we may be able to do about a situation where we don't just have a selection of brochures from Franklin, but have a selection of regional historical brochures. So that a New Garden location or a London Britain location might have some of ours and we might have some of theirs. But for
Yeah,
now,
I
this
think
is a
that's
very
more
first-
valuable. Yeah,
What?
that's more valuable.
Yeah, this is a very first small step, but I am starting to make progress on this. There's nothing particular happening with the website for Township history. And in terms of talks and training, I don't have anything. I've got to be talking with New London, so I don't know whether there's going to be a talk in November or not. And New London ultimately has, they have the host building, so they're going to have more of a say in it. And I don't know what their township policy is with respect to having gatherings in the building yet. So, but I still need to talk to the Chester County Historical Society about free attendance at talks or reduced fees at talks. I did not get that done this month. So that's something I've still got to look into, and I'm aware of it. I've got to do that. And so that's all I have to report on that. Is there anything else anybody else would like to bring up with respect to talks and training, or with respect to historical issues generally that we haven't talked about tonight?
The hallowed grave, there's a
Oh, yes.
couple
Yes.
weeks, the
That,
23rd, I think.
signed up for that. Has anybody else signed up for that?
I did.
Yeah. Nan, are you aware of that?
Yeah, I looked at it and it was unclear when I looked at it quickly. Is it a Zoom meeting or do you have to attend?
No, it's a Zoom meeting. Let me see. I've got it on my cell phone.
Well, I'll look again because when I looked when you first put it out, they didn't really have a whole lot of information and I wasn't sure what the deal was.
So it's a virtual meeting on Saturday, October 23rd from 10 to 3. And the title of the meeting, which is all too appropriate for our issues, is Reclaiming African American Cemeteries in Your Community. And
It's from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon?
yeah, they've got to have a break in there somewhere.
All right, I'll look at it again.
Yeah, this is a new one. I can forward. You want me to forward this?
Sure.
I can do this right now, actually.
You had forwarded something. I think it was Facebook or
Yeah,
something.
this is a slightly different. I think this is a later one with a little more detail. So I just sent it from my cell phone to your
Okay.
Gmail account.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, the length is reflective of the length that the meetings have tended. The one I attended up near Devon went about that long, but that was several years ago. They tend to rotate where they meet. And this one, obviously, because it's virtual, does not have a location limitation that way. So I'm planning to attend and at least, sit through as much as I can physically tolerate. 5 hours of sitting is a long time.
Yeah.
But you can get up, you can get something to eat, you can come back, sit down. If you're on Zoom and your face isn't visible on the screen, you have a little more flexibility. I'm hoping that they will record it so that it will be available for anyone who's interested. And since it's usually fairly easy to record Zoom meetings or live stream them otherwise, that may be a possibility. But yeah, thank you for bringing it up, Sally.
Yeah.
I meant to mention that, and somehow it failed to make the list I compiled for the Churchill Cemetery. Like the meeting I attended several years ago was very nice and thoughtful, and the hallowed grounds project began initially as a kind of one-off that was associated with the Grand Army Review or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's continued as an ongoing project since then.
Good.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, I know there's going to be no public comment. We can adjourn at 8:40. So I wish you a nice rest of your evening and nice month, and maybe we'll have some pleasant weather this week that does not involve rain or clouds. A lot of it does not look good.
Right. All right. Nice to
Okay.
see everybody.